Dear friends, welcome to our channel. We are delighted to share with you different stories of love and betrayal from around the world. So let's begin our story journey today. This is your entire worth, Elliot. A pile of unwanted junk that nobody cares about. Sylvia's mockery echoed in the air of the upscale restaurant, her slender fingers tapping on the divorce agreement, her red lips curled into a victorious smile. April in Paris, champagne glittering under candlelight, and Elliot Blackwood's 40th birthday celebration had turned into a public execution before everyone's eyes. "I want a divorce from you," she announced, her voice clear enough for guests at neighboring tables to hear. "We'll sell the house and split the money. As for that junk-filled old warehouse of your grandfather's, it's all yours." Elliot felt dizzy. 12 years of marriage, on what should have been a day of celebration, so coldly terminated by Sylvia. But the real pain wasn't the divorce itself, but the undisguised contempt in her eyes and the awkward silence of friends around them. "Why does it have to be today?" Elliot asked quietly, trying to control his emotions. Sylvia tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, revealing that expensive bracelet Elliot had never seen before. "Because it's your birthday, darling. You should have a new beginning, shouldn't you?" Her sarcasm was suffocating. Leaving behind a failed art appraiser, someone who was fired for stubbornly adhering to so-called professional ethics. 6 months earlier, when Elliot was working at Christie's auction house, he refused to endorse a Renaissance painting he was certain was a forgery. Behind that painting stood the auction house's biggest client, and Elliot's insistence ultimately cost him his job. He looked around, those once friends avoiding his gaze. Only Harrison Thorne, that emerging gallery owner, was observing everything with a subtle smile. Suddenly, all the pieces fit together. "It's Harrison, isn't it?" Elliot asked calmly. Sylvia raised an eyebrow, not denying it, but instead asked, "Do you really want to discuss this here?" "No, I don't." Elliot stood up, throwing his napkin onto his half-empty plate. "But I do want to know, how long has this betrayal been going on?" "Long enough," Sylvia replied coldly. "Long enough for me to see that there's no future between us anymore. Elliot, you live in fantasies of the past, while Harrison at least knows how to survive in the real world." Elliot felt a sting of pain, but he refused to lose composure on such an occasion. He took out his wallet, left enough money to pay the bill, and then calmly said, "Sylvia, you'll regret this." Sylvia let out a scoffing laugh. "Regret what? Leaving a loser who can't even maintain a basic living? Or giving up that priceless treasure of a dilapidated warehouse?" She raised her glass. "I wish you happiness living with that garbage, Elliot. That's your entire worth." Elliot turned and left, not looking back. He didn't see the fleeting uncertainty on Sylvia's face, nor did he hear the sound of Harrison walking over to clink glasses with her. He only felt an unprecedented shame and betrayal, but at the same time, beneath that pain, a firm determination was forming. May in Paris, sunlight pierced through the light mist of Montmartre, spilling onto every corner of the city. Elliot stood in front of the old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, keys clutched tightly in his hand. The divorce proceedings had been surprisingly quick. Sylvia was obviously eager to start her new life with Harrison. Pushing open that rusty iron door, dust danced in the sunlight. The interior of the warehouse was more cluttered than he remembered. Forgotten paintings, old books, sculpture fragments, and various art materials piled up like mountains. This was the entire legacy left by his grandfather, Ambrose Blackwood, a painter who loved art but never became famous, and it was also Elliot's only shelter now. "Well, at least it's better than being on the street," Elliot said self-mockingly, beginning to clear a space in the corner where he could place a bed. In the following weeks, Elliot maintained a basic living by working at a nearby cafe. Whenever he served a cup of coffee or wiped a table, he could feel the pitying glances from customers. In this social media era, his story had already spread, that art appraiser who was humiliated and abandoned by his wife at his birthday party, now living in a dilapidated warehouse. After returning to the warehouse at night, Elliot began systematically organizing his grandfather's relics, partly to look for valuable items to sell, partly to pass the time. In a long-sealed corner, he discovered a wooden box wrapped in thick cloth. Out of professional habit, he carefully unwrapped the package, revealing several severely damaged small paintings. Despite being covered with thick dust and stains, certain brushstrokes and compositions immediately caught his professional interest. He gently wiped a small area, and the color treatment revealed made his heart race. This light and shadow treatment, this brushstroke. Elliot muttered, immediately taking out a magnifying glass to examine carefully. He quickly checked the other paintings in the box, discovering 5 works of similar style, all severely damaged by improper storage. But even in such a state, his professional instinct told him these might not be ordinary paintings. Elliot recalled stories his grandfather had told him in life about how during World War II he had helped a fleeing Jewish art merchant family. As thanks, they gave him some precious objects that no one would think to look for. At the time, he thought they were just the old man's exaggerations, but now, he needed more professional equipment and opinions. The next day, Elliot carefully packed the smallest painting into his backpack and headed to see an old restorer he knew. Nathaniel was a friend Elliot had met when working at the Louvre, and although now retired, his skill was still unparalleled. "I need your help, Nathaniel," said Elliot. "I have something that might be very important, but I need you to keep this secret." Nathaniel, a white-haired old man, put on his glasses and carefully examined the damaged painting. As the examination deepened, his expression changed from curiosity to astonishment. "Elliot, this cannot be." "I'm not certain," Elliot interrupted, "but look at this signature in the corner and this unique chiaroscuro technique. I have a feeling." Nathaniel took off his glasses and looked sharply at Elliot. "Where did you get this?" Elliot briefly explained the warehouse situation, carefully avoiding the painful details about the divorce. After listening, Nathaniel thought for a moment and then said, "I need to do some preliminary cleaning and analysis. This could take a few weeks, and it won't be cheap." "I don't have much money," Elliot admitted, "but this is very important to me." Nathaniel looked at this former colleague, now fallen on hard times but still clinging to his artistic convictions, and nodded. "For art, we'll find a way. Give me 2 weeks." In the following days, Elliot spent countless sleepless nights in the dim warehouse, studying the style, technique, and possible origins of those paintings. He exhausted his last savings to purchase some basic cleaning tools and research materials, while continuing to work at the cafe to make a living. Whenever Sylvia and Harrison appeared at the cafe, the atmosphere became awkward and tense. Sylvia wore expensive clothing, adorned with shining jewelry, arrogantly clinging to Harrison's arm, deliberately avoiding Elliot's gaze. Harrison always carried a smirk of contempt and victory, deliberately showing off their happiness in front of Elliot. "Look at that poor devil," Elliot once overheard Harrison saying quietly to Sylvia, still struggling for those outdated art theories. "That's why he'll never succeed." Sylvia responded with a laugh. "That's why I left him. One must look forward, not immerse oneself in fantasies of the past." Elliot gritted his teeth, silently enduring these humiliations, because he knew that the truth might soon be revealed. 2 weeks later, Nathaniel finally called, with contained excitement in his voice. "Elliot, you must come immediately. Close the door, pull down the curtains." When Elliot arrived at Nathaniel's workshop, the old man had already locked all doors and windows. On the workbench, the small painting had already been preliminarily cleaned, revealing surprising details and colors. "Look here," Nathaniel pointed to a corner of the painting, his fingers slightly trembling. "This signature, this composition method, and this special paint usage technique. Elliot, I think we might be facing an early work by Caravaggio." Elliot felt dizzy. Caravaggio, one of the pioneers of Baroque painting, whose works were worth fortunes in the art market. "We need more evidence." Elliot forced himself to calm down. "Paint analysis, canvas dating, expert confirmation. I have a friend who works in the Louvre's laboratory," said Nathaniel. "She can help us do some preliminary tests secretly, but won't leave official records. However, this will cost money." Elliot bit his lip. He had almost no money left, but this might be his only chance. "I'll manage." Over the next month, Elliot sold all his valuable personal possessions, including his cherished art book collection and some small artworks. He even accepted a full-time waiter job at a cafe near Harrison's gallery, enduring the pain of occasionally encountering Sylvia and Harrison. Whenever he saw Sylvia on Harrison's arm, wearing those expensive jewels entering and exiting fancy restaurants, he remembered the humiliation of that birthday night. But at the same time, A strange calm and confidence also ignited in his heart. The test results gradually came back. The paint composition matched materials used by Italian artists from the late 16th to early 17th century. The canvas fibers and treatment matched the characteristics of that period. X-ray analysis showed typical Caravaggio underlying sketch technique. But Elliot knew that to confirm the true identity and value of this painting, he needed more authoritative verification. He needed a true expert, someone who wouldn't be influenced by commercial interests. It was then that Elliot thought of someone, Prescott Langley, a renowned British collector and art historian, famous for his research on Baroque painting and his amazing appreciation ability. 3 years earlier, Elliot had helped Langley authenticate a disputed Velázquez work at an international art symposium, earning his respect. After several attempts, Elliot finally managed to secure a brief meeting through Langley's secretary. He carefully carried the painting that had been preliminarily restored, taking the cheapest train to Langley's private villa in Provence. Langley was a thin man in his 60s, whose penetrating eyes revealed the wisdom accumulated from decades of art appreciation. When Elliot showed the painting, there was silence in the room. Langley put on a special magnifying glass, carefully examining every detail of the painting, occasionally making thoughtful sounds. Finally, he looked up and gazed deeply at Elliot. "Mr. Blackwood, what is the origin of this painting?" Elliot explained the story about his grandfather and how he had discovered these paintings in the warehouse. He deliberately avoided details about his personal situation, emphasizing only the characteristics of the work and the preliminary tests that had been conducted. Langley fell into thought and then said, "I need to examine this painting in more detail and do some additional tests. If you agree, I would like to take it to my laboratory. Of course, I'll provide a formal receipt and ensure its safety." Elliot hesitated. Handing over this potentially priceless painting to someone else for safekeeping was a huge risk. But he knew that if he wanted to get real confirmation, this was a necessary step. "I need your guarantee that this will be treated confidentially, at least until we determine its authenticity," said Elliot. Langley smiled slightly. "Of course, I understand your caution. In fact, I believe this might be more important than you imagine. If my intuition is correct, this might not just be an early work by Caravaggio, but one of his Lost Matthew series." Elliot felt dizzy. The Lost Matthew series was one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in art history. According to records, Caravaggio had created a series of paintings depicting the life of Saint Matthew for the Church of St. Louis of the French in Rome, but some of them had disappeared in the early 17th century and were never found. "I need 2 weeks," said Langley. "Then we'll meet again to discuss the next steps." After returning to Paris, Elliot felt like he was living in a dream. He continued working at the cafe, continued organizing other items in the warehouse, but his thoughts always flew to that painting that might change his life. One afternoon, while wiping tables at the cafe, Harrison and Sylvia walked in. Sylvia wore an expensive designer suit, but Elliot noticed she had obvious dark circles under her eyes and her smile seemed somewhat forced. Harrison was as confident as ever, treating the service staff with a condescending attitude. When they saw Elliot, Harrison flashed a contemptuous smile. "Look who's here," he said, deliberately raising his voice. The conscience of the art world, now reduced to wiping tables. Sylvia seemed somewhat uncomfortable, but she didn't stop Harrison's mockery, instead joining in. "I heard you're living in that warehouse. Found any treasures, Elliot?" her tone full of sarcasm. Elliot simply continued his work calmly, ignoring their provocations. This indifferent response seemed to anger Harrison more. "You know what, Blackwood?" Harrison continued. "I could give you a job cleaning at my gallery. After all, your ability to identify garbage is really first class." Several customers began to uncomfortably watch this scene, and Sylvia pulled at Harrison's sleeve, saying quietly, "Enough, Harrison, let's go." Harrison stood up reluctantly, but before leaving, he leaned toward Elliot and said, "Enjoy your failed life, Elliot. This is the result of obstinacy and presumption." Elliot watched them leave, feeling no anger in his heart, only a strange calmness. He knew that soon, these mockeries would turn into disbelief. Just as the 2-week deadline was about to be reached, Elliot received an urgent package from Langley. It wasn't the confirmation he expected, but a private jet ticket and a mysterious invitation. Head to London immediately to attend an extremely important private meeting. With his last savings and infinite questions, Elliot took that private jet. At London's Heathrow Airport, a black sedan was already waiting for him, taking him directly to a luxurious apartment building in the Mayfair district. Langley himself greeted him at the door, with an expression on his face that Elliot had never seen before. "Mr. Blackwood, please come in. There are some people who really want to meet you." Elliot walked into the apartment and found 3 more people in the room. A middle-aged man who looked like a lawyer, an elegantly dressed Asian lady, and a figure Elliot immediately recognized: Lord Thaddeus Remington, one of the world's wealthiest art collectors and a major collector of Caravaggio works. "Elliot Blackwood," said Remington in a deep voice, "I hear you possess a treasure that could change art history." In the following hours, Elliot entered a completely new world. Remington showed him Langley's detailed report, confirming that the painting was very likely one of Caravaggio's Lost Matthew series, depicting Matthew being called by an angel. "We've conducted the most advanced material analyses, X-ray and infrared scanning, and detailed comparison with other known works by Caravaggio," explained Remington. "All evidence points to one conclusion: it's genuine, and possibly just the tip of the iceberg." Elliot felt dizzy. "Are you saying there are other paintings?" "According to your description and preliminary photos, the other paintings in your warehouse might also be part of the series," Langley intervened. "If so, this would be one of the most significant discoveries in the art world in nearly a century." The Asian lady, who introduced herself as Mei Lin, was a representative of an international art insurance company. "Mr. Blackwood, we would like to conduct a professional assessment and protection of your discovery. If you agree, we can immediately dispatch a security team to Paris to ensure the safety of these artworks." Countless thoughts raced through Elliot's mind. He thought of the dilapidated warehouse, of Sylvia's mockery, of the struggles and perseverance of the past few months. Now, the scales of fate seemed about to tip. "Before we continue," said Elliot cautiously, "I need to clarify ownership issues. These paintings were legally acquired by my grandfather and now belong to me." "Of course," the lawyer spoke up. "We've prepared a detailed agreement confirming your ownership of these artworks. At the same time, Lord Remington wishes to make you an acquisition proposal for the first already confirmed work." Remington took a check from his inside pocket and handed it to Elliot. "This is my initial offer, only for that already confirmed painting. The value of the other works will be negotiated separately after their confirmation." Elliot looked at the check, and the figure almost prevented him from breathing: 20 million euros. This amount was far more than he had saved in his entire life, even exceeding all possible income as an art appraiser. "This is just the beginning," said Remington calmly, as if talking about the weather. "If the other paintings are also confirmed as genuine, the total value could exceed 100 million euros. But more important is the historical significance. This will rewrite an important chapter in art history." Elliot took a deep breath, trying to maintain composure. "I need to think about this." "Of course," Remington nodded. "But allow us to take immediate measures to protect these artworks. Time is crucial for ancient works in poor conservation condition." After a brief discussion, Elliot agreed to allow Maylin's team to head to Paris to conduct a professional assessment and protection of the paintings in the warehouse. They would arrive within 24 hours and work under Elliot's supervision. When the meeting ended, Langley pulled Elliot aside. "You know what this means, don't you?" the old man asked quietly. "Once the news goes public, your life will change forever. Are you prepared?" Elliot thought of Sylvia's words. "This is your entire worth, Elliot." A pile of forgotten, unwanted garbage. A mixture of emotions welled up in his heart, combining the pleasure of revenge and surprise at the dramatic turn of fate. "I'm ready," he replied calmly. After returning to Paris, things developed faster than Elliot had imagined. Maylin's team, composed of restoration experts, security personnel, and art historians, conducted a thorough inspection of the warehouse. They confirmed that 2 other paintings were also very likely works by Caravaggio, belonging to the same series. Security measures were immediately upgraded. The warehouse was transformed into a temporary high-tech vault, equipped with 24-hour surveillance systems and security personnel. Elliot continued to live there, but conditions had greatly improved, with proper heating, lighting, and basic facilities. The deal with Remington was quickly completed. The first painting was officially sold, and Elliot's bank account had 20 million euros more. The evaluation and confirmation work for the other paintings was still in progress, but preliminary estimates indicated their total value might exceed 80 million euros. After signing confidentiality agreements, a small team of experts began to thoroughly research this discovery. They believed these paintings were the parts considered lost from the Matthew series that Caravaggio had created for the Church of St. Louis of the French in Rome, whose historical significance was incalculable. However, Elliot and Remington agreed not to announce this discovery to the public until all paintings were fully confirmed and properly preserved. This secret was strictly kept, with only a handful of key people informed. Meanwhile, Elliot's life began to change dramatically. He quit his job at the cafe and bought an elegant apartment in Montmartre. But he kept a low profile, not flaunting his sudden wealth, focusing on collaborating with top art experts and deepening his research into Caravaggio's techniques and history. In this process, he discovered he had fallen in love with art research again, that pure passion reignited. He began planning to transform the old warehouse into a small private research center, focused on overlooked artists and works. One September evening, while Elliot was enjoying dinner on the balcony of his new apartment, the phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Remington. "Mr. Blackwood." Remington's voice revealed an excitement he couldn't hide. "The final report is complete. All 5 paintings have been confirmed as authentic Caravaggio works, part of the Lost Matthew series. We're prepared to announce this discovery at Christie's autumn auction next month." Elliot tightened his grip on the phone. "So soon?" "The timing is right," explained Remington. "We've prepared a complete exhibition plan, including a documentary on the restoration process and your grandfather's story. Of course, if you wish, we can conceal your personal information." Elliot was silent for a moment. Remaining anonymous was a tempting option. He could avoid unnecessary attention and distractions. But another thought emerged in his mind: letting everyone, especially Sylvia and Harrison, know of his achievement and the opportunity they had missed. "No," he finally said, "use my name. I want to appear publicly as the protagonist of this discovery." Remington laughed. "I knew you'd say that. Get ready for the storm, Elliot. The art world is about to go crazy for you." In early October, Remington held a grand press conference in London, announcing this discovery that shocked the art world. Major global media sent reporters, and the venue was packed. Professional photographers' flashes constantly blinked, documenting this historic moment. Elliot sat on the stage, dressed in a tailored suit, looking confident and calm. When Remington introduced him as the hero of the most important art discovery of the century, the entire place erupted in enthusiastic applause. "Mr. Elliot Blackwood has not only demonstrated exceptional professional insight, more importantly, he has shown a pure love and firm belief in art," said Remington into the microphone. "In today's commercially driven art market, such qualities are especially precious." The media frenziedly reported on this story, how a fired art appraiser had discovered priceless art treasures in a forgotten warehouse. How, with professional knowledge and perseverance, he had confirmed their true identity. His professional persistence and pure love for art were acclaimed as the true artistic spirit. Overnight, Elliot Blackwood became the new darling of the international art world. Major museums and auction houses competed to invite him as a consultant. Universities and art schools offered him lectures and honorary positions. Publishers presented generous contracts, hoping he would write his own story and insights on art appreciation. In Paris, this news spread like wildfire. Elliot's former colleagues were surprised to discover that the appraiser who was fired for adhering to professional ethics was now a legendary figure in the art world. The director of Christie's auction house even personally called, inviting him to return and offering a higher position and salary, an offer that Elliot politely declined. "I once lost a job because I refused to compromise on authenticity," he said in an interview with International Art magazine. At that time, some thought professional integrity was not as important as commercial interests. "Now, I'm fortunate to be able to continue my work in my own way, without having to face that moral dilemma." And in an elegant art gallery, Harrison Thorne angrily threw the newspaper to the floor with the headline, "The Forgotten Baroque Master." Caravaggio's lost masterpieces reappear, alongside a photo of Elliot smiling next to those paintings. "Damn it," roared Harrison, making his assistant step back. "I knew he was hiding something. That crafty bastard must have known the value of those paintings from the beginning." Sylvia was enjoying breakfast at her new apartment in Paris's 16th district when her phone suddenly rang. It was her mother, with unusual excitement in her voice. "Sylvia, have you seen today's newspaper?" her mother urgently asked. "No, what is it?" Sylvia replied distractedly, browsing social media on her phone. "Turn on the TV. The Art Channel. A report about Elliot." Sylvia felt curious, put down her coffee cup, and picked up the remote to turn on the TV. On the screen, a presenter was excitedly introducing the most significant discovery in the art world in nearly a century. When the camera switched to the press conference scene, Sylvia's coffee cup slipped from her hand, crashing to the floor. Elliot, her ex-husband, whom she had considered a worthless failure, was standing on the stage beside the world-famous art collector Lord Remington. They stood in front of 5 carefully exhibited paintings, supposedly Caravaggio's lost masterpieces. Estimated total value exceeding 100 million euros. The presenter's voice seemed to come from far away. These works were discovered and authenticated by Mr. Elliot Blackwood in the warehouse left by his grandfather, demonstrating his extraordinary professional eye and persistent passion for art. Sylvia felt dizzy, having to hold onto the table to stay steady. She remembered her own words. "This is your entire worth, Elliot. A pile of forgotten, unwanted garbage." With trembling hands, she picked up her phone and dialed Harrison's number. The phone rang for a long time before being answered. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without waiting for Harrison to speak. "I'm watching it." Harrison's voice was unusually cold. "Seems your ex-husband is much smarter than we thought." "We must contact him," said Sylvia anxiously. "That warehouse, those paintings, they were also common property before our divorce, right? Legally, I should have." "Don't dream, Sylvia," interrupted Harrison, with a touch of sarcasm in his voice. "You signed the divorce agreement, explicitly giving up all rights to that warehouse. Your lawyer assured you it only contained worthless junk, remember?" Sylvia felt nauseous. Yes, she remembered. At that time, she had disdained that old warehouse, even mocked Elliot's decision to keep it. Her lawyer had advised her to completely cut all ties with Elliot, and the seemingly worthless warehouse seemed the perfect solution. But he knew before the divorce, right? He surely knew the value of those paintings, but concealed it. That's fraud. Sylvia's voice trembled. "Do you really think that argument will stand?" Harrison scoffed. "Reports say he discovered and confirmed the value of those paintings after your divorce. Unless you can prove he knew before the divorce, you have no legal basis." "We must see him," insisted Sylvia. "Perhaps he's willing to." "We?" Harrison's voice suddenly turned cold. "Sylvia, what are you thinking? Do you really believe that, after you abandoned and humiliated him, he would be willing to share anything with you? More importantly, do you really think I would support you in going to ask him for money?" There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. Then Harrison spoke in a tone of indifference that Sylvia had never heard before. "I think we need to reconsider our relationship." This greedy sighed. "I'm not sure I want to continue." After hanging up, Sylvia collapsed onto the sofa, feeling unprecedented fear. She realized she might have lost everything, not just those priceless artworks, but also Harrison, the man for whom she had abandoned her marriage. In the following days, Sylvia frantically tracked all news about Elliot. She learned he had become the new darling of the art world, invited to all kinds of high-end events, interviewed by top media. In photos, he looked confident and mature, very different from the introverted husband she remembered, always immersed in art theories. Meanwhile, her relationship with Harrison rapidly deteriorated. Harrison became cold and irritable, often disappearing without explanation for hours. When Sylvia questioned him, he just vaguely said, "Work needs," but she found provocative messages with several women on his phone. One evening, when Harrison returned late again with the excuse of work, Sylvia decided to visit his gallery. When she arrived, the gallery was already closed, but there was still light inside. Through the window, she saw Harrison intimately conversing with a young woman, his recently hired assistant. Sylvia felt a horrible familiarity, just like when she and Harrison began their relationship. Only now she was the betrayed one. She silently left, with panic and anger intermingled in her heart. The next day, she saw an interview with Elliot in a fashion magazine. The article detailed how, after being abandoned, he lived alone in that dilapidated warehouse, how he discovered those buried art treasures with his professional knowledge and perseverance. Fate is sometimes really dramatic, said Elliot in the interview. Some thought that warehouse was worthless, but to me, it contained my grandfather's memories and love for art. I never imagined such a discovery, but this proves that true value is often not on the surface. Sylvia put down the magazine, tears flowing uncontrollably. She suddenly realized how terrible her mistakes had been, not just giving up an immense fortune, but abandoning a man who truly loved and respected her. In exchange, she got a relationship based on false promises and superficial attraction. Just then, her phone rang. It was her lawyer with a serious voice. "Sylvia, we need to talk. Harrison Thorne has just contacted the gallery's landlord, indicating he will terminate the lease next month. According to my sources, he has already started contacting galleries abroad, preparing to leave Paris." Sylvia felt dizzy. Harrison was leaving? Without consulting her? "One more thing," continued the lawyer. "Those artworks you jointly invested in. He has already begun to sell them secretly. I believe you should take legal action immediately to protect your interests." After hanging up, Sylvia rushed to the bedroom, opened the safe, and checked her jewelry and important documents. With horror, she discovered several of her most valuable jewels were missing, including that bracelet Harrison had given her at the beginning of their relationship. A terrible realization hit her. Harrison was abandoning her, just as she had abandoned Elliot. But unlike Elliot, Harrison was taking away everything valuable before leaving. On a rainy November night, Elliot had just returned to his new apartment after a private dinner. As part of the celebration for the opening of the Caravaggio Works exhibition, this dinner had gathered the elite of the European art world. He was tired but satisfied, finally receiving recognition and respect from his colleagues. As he prepared for bed, the doorbell suddenly rang. Through the monitor, he saw a familiar figure standing in the rain. Sylvia, soaking wet, with smeared makeup, looking exceptionally miserable. Elliot hesitated. Since that press conference, he had anticipated that Sylvia might come looking for him, but hadn't expected it would be like this. He took a deep breath and pressed the intercom. "What is it, Sylvia?" he asked calmly. "Elliot, please." Sylvia's voice was tearful. "Can we talk? Just a few minutes. I need to see you." Elliot recalled the humiliation of his birthday, recalled the months of struggle and loneliness. But he didn't want to be a cruel person. "5 minutes," he finally said, pressing the button to open the door. Sylvia entered the apartment, looking worse than on the monitor. Her blonde hair was messily stuck to her face, her expensive coat soaked by the rain, her eyes swollen, obviously having cried. "It's beautiful here." She looked around, trying to smile. "Much better than our old apartment." Elliot didn't respond to this awkward opening, just asked, "What do you want, Sylvia?" Sylvia's smile disappeared, replaced by an almost desperate expression. "Harrison is leaving Paris. He's taken most of the artwork we jointly invested in, and some of my jewelry. The lawyer says it might be difficult to recover. So now you need money," said Elliot calmly. "That's why you've come to me." "No, not just that," said Sylvia anxiously, stepping forward. "Elliot, I made a terrible mistake. Leaving you was the stupidest decision of my life. I still love you." Elliot felt anger rising from the depths of his heart. "Love me? Or love my money?" "Sylvia, when you abandoned me, I had nothing. Living in that warehouse you thought was worthless. Now that I have money, have fame, you suddenly love me again?" Tears burst from Sylvia's eyes. "I know it looks that way, but it's not. I really regret it. When I saw you on TV, when I saw you had succeeded, I felt proud of you, truly. I just hope to have a chance to make amends for my mistakes." Elliot looked at this woman who was once his wife, feeling a complex emotion. How much he had loved her, how much he had trusted her, and she had chosen betrayal and humiliation. Now she stood here, wet, miserable, begging for a second chance. "I'm sorry, Sylvia," he finally said, with no pity in his voice, only calm resolution. "But some mistakes cannot be repaired. You betrayed me, not just because of infidelity, but because of your mockery and contempt toward me. You thought I was worthless and only returned to me after I've proven my value. This isn't love, it's opportunism and selfishness. Sylvia broke down, kneeling on the floor, tightly grasping Elliot's hand. Please, Elliot, I need you. I have nowhere else to go, no one to rely on. Elliot gently withdrew his hand, stepping back. As you once told me, Sylvia, we're finished. Please leave. But those paintings, said Sylvia desperately, they existed during our marriage. Legally, I should have rights. Elliot's gaze turned cold. You signed the divorce agreement, explicitly giving up all rights to that warehouse and its contents. Your lawyer assured you it only contained worthless junk, remember? You believed it because you never truly understood the value of art, only seeing superficial things. Elliot, please, Sylvia pleaded again. Give me a chance. I already gave you a chance, Sylvia. 12 years of chance. Now, please leave. Elliot walked to the door and opened it. When Sylvia finally left, Elliot stood by the window, watching her stumble away in the rain. He didn't regret his decision, but he wasn't as happy as he had expected either. The taste of revenge wasn't as sweet as he had anticipated, more a kind of relief, a tranquility that came from finally being able to truly let go of the past. With winter's arrival, the art world's enthusiasm for Caravaggio's lost paintings hadn't diminished. The exhibition moved from London to New York, then to Tokyo, causing a sensation wherever it went. Elliot, as the central figure of this discovery, was often invited to opening ceremonies and academic discussions. During this time, he accepted Remington's proposal to become an art advisor to his foundation, responsible for authenticating and acquiring potentially important artworks. This position gave him full professional freedom, while providing generous compensation and prestige. He renovated his grandfather's warehouse, transforming it into a modern art research and restoration center, dedicated to studying overlooked or misclassified artworks. This center soon became an important institution in the Parisian art circle, attracting numerous young art historians and restoration experts to learn and work. Meanwhile, Harrison Thorne's life began to deteriorate. His gallery in Paris had to close due to financial problems, and though he tried to open a new gallery in London, he soon found himself in trouble. Within the art world, rumors began to circulate about his selling forgeries, and several important clients filed lawsuits against him. Sylvia's situation wasn't good either. After Harrison left, she found herself with almost nothing. She was forced to move out of her luxury apartment into a small studio. She tried to return to work in the fashion industry, but her long absence and emotional problems made it difficult to find a suitable position. She began to rely on alcohol to numb herself, becoming increasingly withdrawn from friends. A year later, in spring, Elliot welcomed experts and scholars from around the world to his art research center. This center had already successfully authenticated and restored several important artworks, some of which were now displayed in the world's top museums. One day, while Elliot was guiding a group of interns, his assistant handed him a stack of media clippings. A small news item caught his attention. Harrison Thorne had been arrested in London for fraud, facing a long prison term. According to reports, he was accused of selling forgeries to clients and using investors' funds to maintain his personal luxury lifestyle. In another report, Sylvia was described as one of Thorne's victims, supposedly having lost considerable property in her relationship with him. When reporters interviewed her, she looked haggard, only briefly stating, "reaping what one sows." Elliot put down the clippings, feeling a strange emptiness. He had imagined how gratifying it would be to see Sylvia and Harrison punished, but the reality wasn't as satisfying as expected. Their miserable ending wasn't caused by him, but the inevitable result of the path they themselves had chosen. In the evening, Elliot sat alone on the balcony of his apartment in Montmartre, overlooking the lights of Paris. Exactly a year ago, he was still a humiliated and abandoned failure, living in a dilapidated warehouse, maintaining himself on the meager salary from a cafe. Now, he was an important figure in the international art world, with wealth, prestige, and true friends. Fate certainly had a strange sense of humor. That warehouse which Sylvia had ridiculed as worthless not only contained priceless art treasures, more importantly, it helped him rediscover his own value and strength. On his desk was a simple frame with his grandfather's photo. Elliot raised his glass, toasting that photo. "Thank you, grandfather," he said quietly. "Not just for those paintings, but for teaching me to hold on to my convictions." Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Paris, Sylvia was sitting alone under dim light, firmly holding a newspaper clipping with Elliot's photo at an international art symposium. Her eyes were swollen, a half-empty wine bottle beside her. "I once had everything," she murmured, "and then I pushed it away with my own hands." In a police interrogation room in London, Harrison Thorne faced a pile of evidence and charges, his lawyer already having advised him to plead guilty for leniency. He recalled the first time he saw Elliot, that contempt for his professional knowledge, and then the satisfaction of taking his wife away. Now, he was the one excluded, and Elliot's reputation and position in the art world were something he could never reach. As night fell over Paris, Elliot Blackwood walked into his research center, where a work possibly belonging to another forgotten master awaited him. He felt a quiet satisfaction, not from revenge against his ex-wife and her lover, but because he had finally found his true value and place. Life continued forward, and he was ready to face the next challenge, no longer bound by past wounds. This was his ultimate victory, not just wealth and fame, but that inner freedom and peace that no betrayal or harm could take away. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. We look forward to seeing you in our next story.